You had a bit of a jippy belly.
You know what? Yesterday I fried some prawns, and about an hour later I went to my fridge and I realised it wasn't plugged in. And it might
Oh,
have been psychosomatic, but God, I started feeling really sick and I got a headache. And when it's belly and headache, it's usually food related out here.
yeah, yeah, a spot of the green apple splatters. When I went out there, um, when I went out there, I did get ill. It's sort of unavoidable, I think, especially the
Well,
first time.
I haven't had anything really. That yesterday was the nearest, and I still done a stream, so I wasn't sick. The only reason I said it to you was I didn't want to let you down. I wanted to give you some warning. There was a chance I might let you down.
It's an honour to speak to Sir Christopher of House Dangerfield for the first time. I appreciate your time. No, I really do.
Well, we finally got here. I mean, a combination of me being busy, sick, flaky, and forgetful, but we got there in the end. But you came out here. You've been out to Cambodia.
Yeah, yeah. I went out there. Well, I went out to Thailand with a couple of mates. Back in about 2010. It was. So bloody hell, fucking hell, 10 years ago. And yeah, we had like a holiday, 2-week holiday, and I was adamant I was going to see Angkor Wat because ever since I first heard about it as a kid, I suppose, or a teenager, I don't know when, but it's on the bucket list. I was not going to go to Southeast Asia and not go to Angkor Wat. So I did that. They actually just stayed down in the islands, in Thailand, the Thai islands.
Whereabouts did you go in Thailand? When you say the islands, I'm thinking what? Koh Phi Phi?
So what did I do? Flew into Bangkok and did the classic thing. I'd read the island or the beach.
Oh, right.
Stayed on Koh Sam Road.
Yeah. You stayed on Koh Sam Road.
Yeah. It's like a real cliche of a hovel of a.
Mate. I know the Koh Sam Road very well, but you haven't got to worry about cliches. I'll give you the very brief version. I've just written a novel about this. I was a drug addict for most of my life. So when in my 20s, when all my mates were coming back from Thailand going, oh, you'd love it. Loads of drinking, loads of girls, loads of parties, sunshine, ride around on scooters. And I just had to blank it because I knew I couldn't do it. I just sort of pretended it didn't exist. And I was very jealous. And it was a dark time. Heroin addiction can do that to you. It's not all good, And when I finally got clean at 35, maybe 36, I came out of rehab with nearly $250,000 in the bank because I'd set up a business. And it was shocking to have freedom and money. And so I thought, right, it's time to make up for lost time. I'll go to Thailand. And rather than asking for any help or whatever, I thought, right, well, they all used to say Phuket. So I've gone on the internet, Phuket. Where's the beach? Patong. And so I booked a week of all the stupid lengths of time. That includes traveling. So I actually had 6 days there. And when I told my friends, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to Thailand. I've booked a Patong. And they were all laughing at me. And I felt very humiliated. They said, you could have gone anywhere in the world and you've gone to the armpit of Thailand. So it's like Margate in Thailand. And I was kind of embarrassed, to be honest with you. But I fell in love with Patong. It's my spiritual home to this day. And I know the Koh Sam Road very well. And yes, while it is the Koh Sam Road and it's full of Australians getting drunk and prostitutes, I like all that stuff. And, I just like it. So when you say you stayed there, oh, Jesus, incredible. And down Soy Cowboy as well. That's down that way, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I only stayed in there. I didn't really go to Southeast Asia for the city thing. And my mates were like in love with Samui, Koh Samui, so they wanted to get down there as quickly as possible. So I went to Samui for like a few days, and then I went to I didn't go Koh Phi Phi. I went to Koh Phangan. I had and the other island there. I went to a half moon party.
That's so 2010 to do a half moon party on Koh Phangan. Did you? When I first went to Samui, the problem I ended up with, I spent 10 years going to Patong for about half of each year. I can work anywhere if I've got a Wi-Fi. So I'd just spend as much time as I could out there. And then I ended up with an English girlfriend. Well, she was Vietnamese, but she was born in England. And it was quite awkward because she obviously had heard me talk about Thailand a lot. And she was like, oh, we're going to go to Thailand. And I can't take her to Patong. I know too many people there. I've done too much. So we ended up going to Samui. So, yeah, incredible. Love Samui.
Yeah, I love the island life. I mean, I don't think I could live there indefinitely, but for a holiday or a few months or something, it's lovely, isn't it? Because I'm
Yeah.
city boy, live and work, went to uni in London. I'm a London person, metropolitan person, so the island life is just a million miles away from that, isn't it? And as a break, it was great. But they stayed down there, and I was sort of insistent, so I went up on my own, all the way back to Bangkok, and then got a little bus popped across the border to Siam Reap
Wow.
and did Angkor Wat, but only had one full day. I was there for 3 days. I was in Cambodia for 3 days, but one full blown day doing Angkor Wat, and it was incredible. You've been there, right?
Yeah, I'm quite well travelled, and I tend to avoid the tourist things, not for any real reason apart from they don't appeal to me when I've been to places when I could have gone to Machu Picchu and places like that. I just wasn't, it isn't a decision I've made outright, but never really appealed to me. But I was with a Cambodian girl, Buddhist Cambodian girl, and she wanted to go. So I thought, well, okay, we'll give it a go. And I was absolutely blown away. It was a very, very impressive situation. And then obviously to find out about it. And it was weird. What was really lovely was being with a Buddhist. I mean, as you probably know, Cambodia in general is religiously strange because going back a long, long way, it was a Hindu country, or it was certainly the religion was Hindu. I remember actually going off that topic a bit. I went down in Sihanoukville, which is the southwest coast of Cambodia. This was before I'd been to Angkor. And I went there with a girl, and we went to this temple just on our own on a scooter. And, they're all over Cambodia, temples. It's, littered with them.
Yeah.
And we've got to this temple, and I know Cambodia's Buddhist. There's Buddhists everywhere. You see them walking around in their orange robes and all that. As we were driving the scooter up this sort of walkway, the sort of driveway, with these huge painted snakes either side of it, and you know you're going to a temple, and we passed a load of Buddhists. And then when we got there, I didn't then actually know a lot about the history of Cambodia. This was like probably my second time I'd ever been there then. And when we turned up at this temple, the first thing I looked at was a huge gold statue of Vishnu. I knew what Vishnu looked like, and I was thinking, hang on a minute, we haven't even come to a Buddhist temple. This is a Hindu temple. And then next to that, there was sort of like Shiva, and then there was Ganesh, with the elephant head. Mm-hmm. And I said to my girlfriend, I said, these are all Buddhist things. This isn't Buddha. This isn't Buddhist. This is Hindu, sorry. And she said, well, that's Buddha. And amongst all those Hindu statues was Buddha. 100% Buddha, with the holding his finger, to the ring finger and the thumb together on one hand, and in the lotus position. I was like, yeah, that is Buddha for sure. And then this was very confusing, and the whole temple soon reflected that. And so obviously I looked into it, and yeah, when the Buddhist religion took over, which I think was in about the 12th century, I can't remember his name, Jayavarman or something. Jayavarman the 7th, because there was a whole distant dynasty of them. They didn't smash everything up, which is usual with religious conquests. It's usually all taken to pieces, obviously, and they just blended it. And temples all over Cambodia, including Angkor Wat, is a mixture of Hindu and Buddhist, which seems quite nice, actually.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's one of those things where there's many layers of culture and civilization and religion all on top of each other.
Yeah.
And it's not that that's particularly uncommon. It's just so clear in Cambodia. For example, in Britain, we're, Christian, nominally Christian, but before that there was, the Celts that were not Christian. And before that, even, civilizations, the Stonehenge era people, for example, was a yet more ancient thing. And they're all on top of each other, laid like an onion. You can always go deeper, another layer. But I think, yeah, you're exactly right. In Cambodia, sorry,
I think to find an example in England, it would have been like building a church on Stonehenge.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that happens all over Europe. A lot of Roman temples were turned into churches.
Oh, amazing! I didn't know that.
Yeah, lots of Greek temples are turned into Roman temples that then became churches.
Wow. Wow. I knew
Um,
I'd learn something. I knew it.
well, the layout of a Catholic church is there's many echoes of a Roman temple there, many. Um, but anyway, yeah, the onion that you can peel, and Angkor Wat, it's just so clearly on display there. Yeah, you see lots of Vishnus that have been recarved into Buddhas, and then the face smashed off. It's like, so you're looking immediately at least three layers of history, like right there in one piece.
Well, and also, of course, Angkor has got its own building etched into its own walls. The story of its building is there. These, one of the things, if people listening has never been there, that you don't really get from the photographs is, I'd say about 80% of the stonework is carved, and you don't really notice that until you're there. It's like an acid sort of trip. Everywhere you look, there's stories, there's history, there's celebrations, all sorts of stuff just carved into the walls. There's one walkway, and it's about 400 meters long, and one side, the whole thing, it's like it's like the Bay of Tapestry, but etched into the wall. But for the length of that walkway. And there's all sorts of stories there. The building of anchors in it, wars they had with, I think it was the Cham, right? That was the Vietnamese at the time. I'm not sure. And yeah, it's everywhere. Everything's drawn all over it. And to go there with a Buddhist was quite amazing, because she could recognize things that meant nothing to me, and was on her knees praying and giving thanks and things at different points, and then telling me, broken English, the kind of story behind it. But it was, I've been back a couple of times. It was, it's quite something, a lot of people don't realize, but I think wasn't Angkor not, Angkor Wat is the central temple, isn't it? But when I think when the what was it, Endeavour, one of the space shuttles went up, they got them to do satellite photography of it with Angkor at the center. And this is what, 11th century, I think, when it was that big. It's a huge complex, a huge, sprawling metropolis.
Yeah, it's absolutely gigantic. Yeah, you're quite right. And most of it now is reclaimed by the jungle. But when you see, if you ever look at, I'll put pictures up of sort of an aerial view of it, and it's, just absolutely huge. Just to put some perspective on it, they think that maybe at that point, London would have been maybe 30 to 50,000 people. And they think that this Angkor city would have been maybe 750,000 or 1 million.
Yeah.
So absolutely huge.
And with a functioning irrigation system, and that's without doubt, because Cambodia is going to be dry sometimes for 9 months of the year, 8 or 9 months of the year. There's no water coming, so unless you've got that, how are those people going to survive? And they've since found there was quite a what do you call it? Quite a well developed water system, and
fantastically elaborate system of irrigation.
And they dug reservoirs by hand that are just colossal.
The East Barai and the West Barai.
That's it.
Called, and one of them's dried up now, and the other one isn't. And it's like 8 kilometers by 5 kilometers. It looks like a natural lake, but it's sort of perfectly rectangular, and you realise, oh, this is man-made. Incredible, the scale of it.
Yeah. And also, it's quite interesting when you say a lot of it's been consumed by the jungle. Even in the centre, even around the sort of the King's Palace area, you've got those very famous bits that they've used in countless Hollywood films where tree stumps have grown over and sort of consumed whole buildings. But I had a tuk-tuk driver. If you do visit, get a tuk-tuk driver who knows Angkor Wat, because it's going to make such a difference to you. Because, for instance, things like this, I asked him if he could take us. I said, I've seen there's a main 3, really. Sometimes people say 4, but in terms of the sort of mind-blowing, big, spectacular ones, I'd say there's 3 main ones in a very close sort of area. But I asked him if he could show us some of the sort of smaller things where there's no tourists. And he took us to places where, you're walking through, it's not really jungle, but it's pretty dense. He had a machete on the go. And then you just suddenly come across this huge building that, we're all etched the same as Angkor, all stories and faces all over it, and grass has grown up it, and there's just no one there. No one's got anything to do with it. And those things, those little sort of monuments and buildings that sprawl out from the centre, that that they go for miles away from the sort of centre point. It's amazing.
Yeah, I had exactly that sort of experience where I was driving. I got a little moped guy, and just driving along through the jungle, and I just see through the trees some sort of fantastic monument, and it's not on my map or anything. And I ask him to stop, and I go through there, and it's just like, these two massive towers, like on the scale of the Arc de Triomphe, like two twin things next to each other. And I say to him, "Do you know what this is?" He just sort of shrugs, looks at his feet and shrugs. And they're fantastic. They're like half fallen down. It's just so spectacular. And you can only imagine it was some sort of gate at some point for a timber city, which is now long rotted and lost. But they remain in this state of half ruin, and it's fantastic. And then not even really on anyone's map or anything.
They're not considered significant.
Yeah, one of the things you said about how everything's carved, the like Rococo style, where it's just so over the top, so elaborate. Every surface is carved and worked, and it's really incredible. Yeah, but I would also advise people to get a tuk-tuk or a moped guy to take you around, because the site is so huge. After you go to the main Angkor Wat temple, one of the things they always want you to do is go there for sunrise, which again is really good advice, because the sun rising over it in the morning is spectacular. But one little anecdote I'd like to say is that they make you sort of stand, well, they don't make you, you sort of stand near this pond area just in front of the Angkor Wat temple, and the sun rises in front of you, and it's incredible. But it's that tourist thing that you said, like there was just a load of chattering Australians and Germans, glow sticks, and it was sort of ruining for me the feel of it. So I actually went inside. You're allowed to just go inside, and I experienced sunrise from inside Angkor Wat. I climbed up quite high and looked out over the canopy and over the grand square that it's in, and that was much better. I thought it was really good.
You can really get, I mean, you're quite allowed quite free reign, really. You don't have to need a guide to take you around. You're welcome to go where you want, and they will let you sort of get up on things. And I'm with you on that. I mean, I've been quite lucky when I've gone, because there hasn't been hundreds of people there, for sure. There's been times I've been to Angkor where I've probably seen 10 other people, but not at the main one. The King's Palace is always chocker, I imagine. But I have had some really nice times there, but I can't be doing with everyone with their cameras out all the time and jump, it just does me a bit. Yeah,
there's some monuments and some historical places you go to and it's utterly ruined. I don't know if you've been to, off the top of my head, the Sistine Chapel is one of the worst ones. It's absolutely packed, like stinks of BO, and it's just horrible. You can't get any sort of feel. You can't sort of just try and breathe in the history or anything. It's completely ruined. But Angkor Wat is a good one, because other than the main temple, usually when I went anyway, some of them are completely deserted. You've got entirely to yourself, especially those ones when you go out beyond sort of the main 2, 3, 4, that are sort of more beyond that, they're of a later age and they're not quite as good. They're of like a more sandy coloured sandstone, aren't they?
Yeah.
And there it really was almost deserted. But one thing I'd just say about that morning when the sun came up, when I was up there, something almost magical happened. There was, as the sun rose, and because you're much closer to the equator, it rises very quickly, don't you? Go from almost pitch black to just daylight within a minute or two. Yeah. And when that happened, there was like a dawn chorus, but not of birds or larks. It was of sort of unseen monkeys hooting and howling in the forest, really quite loud, just for a few minutes. But I'd never experienced that before. Yeah, well, I remember that sort of quite vividly.
Well, some of the architecture was without a doubt designed to make use of the sunrise as well. There's corridors which will just explode in light, as you say, because it's so equatorial. When that sun comes up, you can watch these corridors look like they're being illuminated artificially. It's so quick and sort of just runs along it about 600 meters. It's just fascinating. I'll tell you what, one of the things that always strikes me about it is when it was, I think there was, you have to look into this, but I think some Portuguese people found it, but it didn't really get much traction. And I think the next bloke was a French geezer, a French archaeologist, sort of stumbled across it, 1850, 1860, something like that. when he discovered it, and he was just in the jungle, I think, and he's just sort of pulled a leaf to one side and thought, wow, wow.
Yeah, he was a botanist.
Incredible. But when he discovered it, there were monks there. There was a small sort of community of monks. And I just imagine, I know what the Cambodians are like about their Buddhism. And obviously Angkor, it's on the money. It's their main lager's called Angkor. They're very proud of it, and rightly so. But imagine those monks thinking, just keep this under our hats. We're having it off a bit here. We've got Angkor Wat to ourselves, just turning up and having dinner in the king's palace. And it must have been quite the thing. And as much as it's brought tourism and a fair amount of money and work to the country, for a while, I think that particular group of monks probably felt very blessed to have Angkor as their temple, as their own temple.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, there's the first account is from a Portuguese guy, I think, from the very late 16th century, incredibly. But then that French botanist dude who apparently, it's like such a classic, brilliant story, isn't it? Brilliant Victorian explorer thing, sort of just come across it. Although that actually happened to me in a way. I was at one point I get off the moped and just sort of walking around these sort of small ruins I've found. That's sort of me. I love a ruin. I love walking around some ruins. And the thing at Angkor Wat is some of these places are almost perfectly intact still, and some are just ruins. And I'm walking around this one, and I sort of walk through a small canopy or a small sort of bush. I don't know how to explain it. A jungle style bush, and then just on the other side of that is this giant pyramid type thing. Like 5 stories tall, and I didn't even realize it was there. And so it's sort of, you just stumble across these things. And to be the first person to do it, like the virgin jungle, to come across it, I mean, it's like something out of fiction, isn't it? It's a brilliant image.
But those ones that you're talking about, I don't think it's that unlikely to think that still today you can probably stumble across some of those that haven't been seen by more than a handful of people in the last 100 200 years. There's that many of them. And there's also like just one block, like a 3.5 foot block of stone fully etched, just sort of half underground, moss growing up it with really ornate and elaborate etchings on it, just there. And you can, as you say, if you can get a tuk-tuk driver who knows those places, and most of them do, because once you've done the main 3, they want to offer you more, obviously. That's how they earn their money. But if you can get out to see those, it's incredible. You then getting that idea of scale, and that idea of, in many ways, I suppose it's kind of like the Greek city-state, isn't it? You've got the king in the middle, and then you've got all the royal courtiers around that, and the moat. I mean, that moat itself, isn't that something ridiculous in size, the moat around the king's palace? And then it's almost like sprawling sort of suburbia, in Angkor, where mainly, I suppose, where the working classes lived, all on the outskirts, and they all contributed. And I think you'll know this more than me, but it was started, I think, about the 5th century. Is that right?
Well, I've got the king list in front of me. The first ones turn up in about the early 800s.
Okay.
AD, yeah.
So it was kind of going for a few hundred years, 500, 600 years?
Yeah. So it ends up in sort of the early 1400s, seem to be when it entirely collapsed, yeah. And the highlights, if you like, the 2 main golden ages of Suryavarman and Jayaravarman, Suryavarman II in sort of the 1100s, early 1100s, and then a generation or 2 later, sort of another golden age of Jayaravarman VII, as you mentioned.
That's it.
And it's Suryavarman II who is the builder of Angkor Wat, the main, as you call it, the King's Temple, the main one that you go to, the first one you come to if you visit from Siam Reap. Yeah, so Suryavarman II is sort of the man, and as you say, lots of the carvings, some of them are just from Hindu mythology, and some are about him and his life and his battles, and they're sort of all mixed together as one. And one of the interesting things just to point out is that they always say, if you ever watch a documentary or you ever hear anyone talking about it or read a book about it, they always say it's the biggest religious building on earth. And although that's true in terms of just the footprint, and it is very tall, I mean, I think it's twice as big as the Tower of London, I would just like to say that there are other impressive things of the same age. For example, at the same time, but roughly contemporaneously, is Lincoln Cathedral. So that's still standing. It isn't ruined or anything. And in terms of I'm no architect or engineer, but that Lincoln Cathedral is far more sophisticated than Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat may be gigantic in terms of its footprint and extremely impressive and extremely tall, but the actual work done isn't of the absolute highest quality. They weren't absolute masters of stoneworking.
Sure.
So the Egyptians, for example, thousands of years before, seem to have been able to work granite to a far more higher level. And there's lots of Angkor Wat itself is actually one of the better preserved, but some of the other ones, like Angkor Thom, they're half falling apart because they didn't use any mortar. There's nothing to really meld them together properly. So it's just gravity, it's just stones on top of others. And it seems they didn't really understand the stresses properly. You know how with timber you can use a massive cross beam to sort of stretch across a whole building or a ship or something, and you can't really do that with stone. It's too heavy, it won't support its own weight, and you can only have a certain amount of span it can handle before it cracks. And they didn't seem to understand that properly, and so that's why a lot of it is ruined. But that's an interesting thing, I think, to say about it.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about things like that, because in all the research I've done, I can't work out, and I don't think anyone does know, why it come to an end. Why did that civilization come to an end, or why did it fail? There's stories of invasions. There's story. They were also very behind in terms of the military. Siam, which is now Thailand, invaded them a few times. The Angkor. I mean, Angkor means city, doesn't it? And Wat means temple. That's the city temple, and that's why that one's called that in the centre. But there was that. I think it might have been failures with the irrigation. But I mean, have you come across anything to give you a sure? Yeah. You have.
I think they know now. Well, historians always say, we know now. We have now discovered the reason. But they think now it's because of the water system. So that up there, it's just a vast plain in northern Cambodia, isn't it? A huge plain, of which Angkor Wat is right in the middle of it. Yeah. And in order to support a city of maybe as 1 million people in the middle of the jungle, you needed this really vast and elaborate system of water irrigation to support them all. And if anything goes wrong with that, suddenly you're in deep trouble, aren't you? Suddenly you could find yourself in a really tight spot if suddenly all these vast rice paddies you were growing to support all these people sort of fail within a handful of years. You're pretty fucked. And it looks like that's what it might have been, because I think even sort of 10, 20 years ago, they didn't think these canal systems were as widespread as they were, but now they realise they were. And if that collapses, and I think the archaeology does now show that they were forced into some desperate measures to try and make this irrigation system work better as it was failing. So it seems like that, but also it's never as simple as that, isn't it? These massive trends of history. There'll be multiple threads. So there's the military side as well.
Yeah.
And the Khmer people were perennially, or just on and off sometime, enemies of the Khams or the Chams, the Shams, however you want to say, which are sort of the Vietnamese people, and the Thais. And eventually, in the early 1400s, it seems the Thai people completely invaded and sort of sacked the area, and that seems to have rung the death knell of that culture.
Well, the story I heard on that one was the Siamese turned up with longbows, etc., and the Khmers had shields and short swords, and that was the end of that battle. But I read about that irrigation system, but it still makes me think, well, hang on, a few hundred years, it would seem to be able to cope with a certain amount of change. But I read something very interesting that was they cut grooves into walkways, and it was almost too finely tuned for its own good, so it wouldn't take much change in. You have a bad year and then you've got big problems.
Well, there's this thing about like the structure of cities. So in modern cities, we have sort of relatively low density, like say suburbs, low density, but really, really high in terms of infrastructure to make it all work, to support millions and maybe tens of millions in modern cities. And that's what they think the medieval ancient Angkor region might have been, very low density, but in order for that to work, it would have had really quite sophisticated, like you say, finely tuned set of infrastructures, and it might only take a small tweak to destroy the whole thing.
Crazy, isn't it?
and suddenly you go from being able to feed 1 million people to hardly any, and things just, it's, you know, like a snowball, things just keep going more and more wrong. If you ever played a game of Civilization, you know, something goes wrong and everything else just grinds to a halt, and it can all implode quite quickly.
Well, no one's had any water to drink in 3 weeks, and 20,000 Siamese troops decide to pay you a visit. Might be a problem there. But there's that original history of the Siamese and the Chams or Cams. You know, these old what's the word? You know the word I'm looking for, between those 3 countries. Oh, come on.
What, like animosity?
Yes, these old animosities continue to this day. You know, there's a lot between these 3 countries. And what I find really interesting about it is not just because of past battles, but there's big arguments about culture. You know, the Thais and the Cambodians have got this thing: whose is theirs, what's Siamese, what's Cambodian, who stole it from who. And I've got myself into quite, not angry, but heated debates. You know, I had a picture on my phone of a Thai girl in traditional Thai outfit doing this sort of Thai dance. And I was in a bar, and I said, "Oh, look, I went to Thailand at the weekend." I showed this photo. I said, "It's beautiful, isn't it?" And she was like, "This not Thai. This Khmer, this Khmer." Really, you know, going for it. And I've really got into the I think they're called asaras or something. These dancing girls of Angkor, and they're carved into the walls, but
everywhere.
But they disappeared from history. They disappeared for centuries. And I think it was one of the queens, I think one of the original Sihanouk's wives, again, look that up to clarify, but who brought it back in about the 40s or something, or the 50s. And so you can see these traditional dancing of Cambodia.
Of the 1950s?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. It looks very much like traditional Thai dancing and outfits. However, it also looks a lot like a lot of the dancing girls carved into Angkor. But when I first saw it, you're like, wow, you know, this stuff must be thousands of years old. And you find out that the Queen kind of not invented it, that would be rude, but has kind of been generous with her history in terms of, you know, do you understand what I'm saying? There's not a lineage that can be traced back to these dancers, you know. Yeah, it's quite strange actually, because, you know, I live in Phnom Penh. I don't know if people listening realise I live in Cambodia, and they will sell this stuff to people, traditional Thai. I even said it, traditional Cambodian dancing, and they go and see them. And as you go in, there's all these pictures on the walls, a lot of black and white photos, and a lot of what appear to be traditional paintings, but they're not. I know they're not. And I'm not saying that it's fraudulent, but it's almost like what they don't tell you is where the significant stuff is. You know, if you casually sort of drink it all in as a one, I know what they're intending you to take from that. You know, there'll be pictures of Angkor at the traditional dance venue, and you'll see very similar to what you're going to see on stage. But the bit between the two, actually, I don't think is there. It's quite interesting.
Do you see the symbolism of the snake quite a lot in Cambodia?
Not really, no.
The Naga snake.
You get them at the temples, all the temples.
Yeah, there's one sort of grand procession, one sort of great causeway going up to, I think it's Angkor Thom, going up to it. And there's these great, fantastic statues, dozens and dozens of them on both sides of this grand walkway, this promenade. And they're holding on both sides just this giant snake, sort of the Naga snake. And this is some symbolism that's neither Hindu nor Buddhist. You know, it's Khmer, really. And so you get there's just another layer of again, I think of maybe the way that the pagan or Celtic symbols and things and iconography are woven into early Christianity.
Every Cambodian temple I've been to, if there's steps, which there usually is, there's snakes either side of the steps, humps, you know, the humps going all the way down to the bottom. And then at the bottom, it opens up into those 7 heads you're talking about, both sides. So that, yeah, I've seen that every temple I've been to. It's a regular feature. And like you say, I'm not aware of that in Hinduism or Buddhism. That's not to say a lot, but I've never seen it. It's a mysterious place. You know, I've been here 2 years and I can still be almost sort of woken up. You know, I can be shocked by something regularly.
Yeah, they're great, strong, great people. When I was there, I mean, it's a cliche, isn't it? But they were great people. They were so welcoming. But these really, really were. Like, one little anecdote I have from that day is like a classic Englishman, a mad dog or an Englishman. I went out in the middle of the blazing heat in the middle of the day, and I see like these little old ladies that are sort of manning stalls to sell water and trinkets. They're sort of looking at me in disbelief as I'm climbing up this pyramid type thing. Those super steep stairs, really steep stairs. You almost have to stand sideways on with your feet. They're that steep, and I'm climbing up it in the middle of the day. And I remember I got to the top and my t-shirt was wringing wet with sweat, wringing wet. I mean, you're in a sauna, really in a sauna, and without any shade from the canopy, it's insanely hot. And I get up there, my shirt's wringing. I take it off. And there's one guy, there's a little Buddhist, a small Buddhist shrine up the top there, manned by a guy, and he's like, no, put your top back on. Yeah. Jesus Christ, it's disgusting to put a wet top back on. I did that, and anyway, when I came down to the bottom of that, I almost passed out.
Yeah.
I really did, pretty much very, very, very close to passing out, and I sort of stumbled towards these Cambodian ladies, and I'm sure they'd seen it all before. I think they were almost smirking, looking back on it in hindsight. And they sorted me out. They just gave me some water and a couple of bananas and put me in a hammock they had behind their stall, and just let me recover there for like 20 minutes. And I was sort of delirious, sort of going in and out of consciousness almost. And in the end, I recovered. The sugars and the water sorted me out, and I was so grateful to them. I was almost in tears with gratitude, and they were just. It was just all they were just really great people, and I found that everywhere because the recent sad history. There's a lot of amputees, and a lot of it actually. When you do go to Angkor, that region, there are quite a lot of places that are cordoned off because it's still landmined. There's a lot of one of the most heavily landmined places in the world is Cambodia, unfortunately. Yeah, or cluster bombs from the 70s.
Even if you go out into the provinces, which I do regularly. You can't just wander off, you sort of can, but if you can't just go places where you can't see a beaten track because there's a lot of mines out there. We've had it so good in the West, and it's created a weak people, without a doubt. These people have just come out of some of the most horrific times any nation can have, and they're rock hard. When I hear feminists moaning about this or that and being oppressed, and out here, it's not unusual to see a 60-year-old little frail woman on a building site laying bricks and carrying hods. That just happens. They're not saying, oh, all the CEOs are men. No, they're out working, because if they don't work, they don't eat. There's no welfare here, none.
Have you ever seen a little kid, even a toddler, that just holds himself as an adult, just walks around and just presents himself, has an air of an adult? Do you know what I mean? I've seen that in Southeast Asia, and you rarely see it in the West. But do you know what I mean?
Well, I think our children are so infantilized. There's so much money to be made from stretching this sort of fabrication of childhood as long and as wide as possible. Whereas out here, that's not a luxury that they've got. That you grow up pretty quickly. You don't go to school, you go out working, because school costs money and working makes rice. So you see a lot of that. I've been sitting up by the river. The Mekong runs through Phnom Penh. It's lovely to sit up there, and you'll just have a couple of girls walk up to you, 5 or 6 years old, and in as good a English as the impression I'm about to give, she'll be sort of like, hey, you need me to go get you anything? And you'll be like, what like? She'll go, what you want? Ice cream, water? I get the lot. And she's 6. And she knows that she's learned how to speak off of MTV or whatever. But, this is important to her. This is how she earns her money. And
when I was in the jungle, this kid comes up to me. Must have been, 10 years old maybe. And he comes up and he says, are you English? And then just reels off, are you French? Are you German? In French and German. And then I say, "Oh, I'm English," and he goes, "Oh, English, Liverpool, Man United." Like
Amazing.
lists about 10 Premiership teams. And anyway, just the smarts on this kid, incredible.
Well, it's the difference between their family eating or not. I mean,
Yeah,
one of the things that happens out here that I've never seen in Thailand, so this will give you an example of the differences. Out here, when you've got your domestic rubbish, you chuck it in a bin or plastic, a bin bag or a plastic bag, and there's places up and down the street where you throw it. Now, it's not going to get picked up that day, even in, at the moment, 38, 39 degree heat. That could be there for 3 days. And at night, when everyone's gone home and the roads are a bit safer, you'll have families come out with like a little 2-wheel sort of trolley, big heavy trolley, and someone's wheeling that along, and there'll be kids like 2, 3, 4 years old. There'll be the grandparents, sometimes sort of 80, 90. They'll find a big pile of bin bags, and then they just get these little metal spikes out and they prod them all, and they're looking for anything they can recycle, usually hard plastic and metals. And they just rip these bags open and they climb in over, these piles of bags can be like 10, 15 foot high. They'll be climbing all over and ripping them all open. Sometimes another family will come over and they'll have the other end of it. And over about like an hour, this huge pile of domestic waste slowly gets smaller and smaller as they're taking all the plastic bottles out, crushing them up, putting them into their thing. And sometimes you'll see kids out doing that, like maybe a brother and a sister and a couple of cousins. No one there over 8 years old. I'm talking 2 o'clock in the morning, walking these little carts through the red light area, just feeding their families.
Peak socialism.
Well, or is it
utopia at its very best?
Yeah, it's quite a place. I do love this country. I would advise people to visit, and if you do visit, get up to Angkor, because if I enjoyed something like that, anyone can.
No, I thought it was great. One thing I would just say is that when I again crossed the Thai-Cambodian border and you get the road to Siem Reap, it really was like on both sides of the road you're suddenly in a Vietnam film. It's not that the Thai landscape doesn't look a bit Vietnam film-like, but I just remember when I crossed over into Cambodia, suddenly it really was like something out of Apocalypse Now, it seemed to me. Maybe it's just something I had imagined.
No, you're absolutely right. And I know exactly what you mean. When like I say, I originally planned to move to Thailand, and I'd been out here on holiday about 8 times. But when you're on holiday, you arrive, you come out of the airport, you get a taxi to your hotel, stay in your hotel, and then down to the beach. When I actually started living here, I thought this is a lot more rough and ready. This is already a lot harsher, perhaps, than Thailand. It's not... Thailand has got 50, 60 years of tourism behind it. It's almost made for Western tourists now, and Cambodia hasn't got that. And yeah, when you go to the provinces, you'll see things that probably might not have changed for what seems to be hundreds of years. And I do think there's a difference in the terrain. It isn't as pretty as Thailand. It appears a bit more hostile, a bit more foreboding. There might be an amount of sort of, we know the history of this place, so we're maybe projecting a bit of that onto it. But I certainly know what you mean. I felt that myself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been a great chat, Chris. Thanks for giving me your time. I again really appreciate it.
No, thank you very much.
And if we could ever do it again, if you ever fancied a particular topic, let me know, and we could always do that.
Well, my concern has actually been okay. I watch a lot of your videos, and everyone knows what they're talking about. And when you said you want to talk about Angkor, I was like, oh, why? But it's been really nice talking to you. And yeah, sure, if something comes up, I'll get back to you.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, thanks for watching some of my videos. I've watched a bunch of yours. I won't say every single one. You put out a shitload of content, bro. But yeah, I've been watching you for a long time, and I just wanted to say to you, I think it's actually quite important, especially the message of don't be downhearted, don't give up, don't feel dispirited or defeated, especially younger guys. Nothing's over, nothing's over. Don't feel dispirited. And I think that message is right now anyway.
I get
quite important.
I get people emailing me all the time. I don't think you quite know what's happening, and it's like, well, regardless, you know, if you're going to be spreading misery, you're doing the enemy's work amongst our ranks. It doesn't serve any other purpose than to demotivate us, and I've got no time for that. But what I can't work out why you haven't got more subs.
Oh, well, hopefully they'll come. I mean, I don't really engage with Twitter or Facebook or anything like that.
Well,
but I probably should. I don't know.
All right. Well, maybe I'll get you on my channel at some point. I'll think of something. Right. We'll talk about this later, and we'll see if you can come on and we'll have a discussion. I'm sure some of mine will come over.
Oh, cheers, dude. Appreciate that. Yeah, I'll definitely take you up on that.
All right. Nice one. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.